Welcome to Turn Extension, a supplemental podcast for the Advanced Maneuvers YouTube channel.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Turn Extension. My name is Devin, Cutthroat Cure on the forums.
Hey everybody, it's Kevin. And with us today on the channel is nobody. Not a day, just me and him. That's it.
So we decided that since we were doing a podcast takeover and all rules were out the window, we decided that we would talk about something that our other two co-hosts know nothing about, which is painting.
Oh, shots fired. Shots fired.
But no, in all seriousness, we decided to talk about painting, and we decided that instead of having like a super serious topic where, you know, we go over something, we figured that tonight's episode would just be more of a discussion piece where we talk about a discussion that we've had kind of a little bit, but we decided to leave the bigger, darker parts of it for when we recorded.
Yeah, and I mean, arguably, I don't know, Devin, what do you think? Do you think this theoretically, the subject of painting requirement, could be this be one of the most dividing issues in the community? Like, a lot of people get frustrated with this is overpowered, this isn't overpowered, but there always seems to be in a lot of the discussions that are happening when it talks about overpowered or things that can or shouldn't be in the game or whatever the case might be, there always seems to be like gray areas. But when it comes to like painting requirements in the game, it seems to be a very black and white yes or no. They're very, won't say there aren't any people because there are always going to be spectrum, but this feels like there's a heavy black and white on this one, that there's not that much gray in between. What do you think?
Not only is there not much gray, so for anybody curious, the topic that we're going to discuss tonight is actually painting requirements in events. So, as some people know, Champions recently was made into an Iron Gauntlet event, and it does have a painting requirement. WTC just recently ended. It has a painting requirement. And the topic came up that possibly that would more tournaments benefit from a painting requirement. Well, and I have to agree with you, Kevin, that it is very either black or white, because and it always seems to surprise me, people who stand on certain sides of the fence completely surprise me for either side.
Yeah, and I think, isn't Masters, like I know Steamroller isn't painting required, but isn't Masters required painting?
Yes. Well, no, yes, maybe, yes. Masters is also a painted. I think the only one that you don't have to be painted for is Steamroller, and I thought there was wasn't there a third one? There's Champions, Masters.
That's it. Champion, Masters, and Steamroller. Iron Gauntlet's a circuit now. It's not a format. Because in Iron Gauntlet, you're either playing a Masters event or a Champions event. So your painting requirements falls due to the event type, not because it's Iron Gauntlet.
So I know that Steamroller doesn't have. So maybe Masters doesn't have the painting requirement? I'm not sure.
No, it's not. And of course, if we're talking about events and tournaments and stuff like that, obviously Iron Arena is not painting required either. But so before we get started, where do you lie on the spectrum? Do you think there should be painting requirement, or do you not think there should be painting requirement?
I believe in there's a need for both painted required events and non-painted required events, because of the fact that I believe that you should be using the non-painted ones while you are painting your stuff for the painted ones. I do believe that major tournaments should be painted, and I understand that people, exist as tournament players who may not focus as much on the hobby side of this, but with so many options between being able to get, your stuff quickly painted, paying for your stuff to be painted, I definitely believe that it does offer more aesthetically, especially in a game using a tabletop, using painted terrain, etc., 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 that is overall painted.
So I want to jump on that one real quick because, in my opinion, that is utter bullcrap. That a lot of people. Well, I guess before. So to be completely transparent, I am on board with requiring events to have fully painted. Our other co-hosts who are not here, so Gaston is a not painter or does not mind having not painted. He will paint. He's gotten better over the ages, but he doesn't see a need for the requirement of it. And Tony, Polar Bear Cub, I believe his exact words was he would rather just take a picture of the model and glue it to a base than even bother assembling the model, let alone painting it. So one of the statements I've heard many, many a times from people is, it's easy to get your things painted because, you can get painting services, you can have a friend do it. You got, there's a billion different ways for you to get your models painted and done. And though I don't disagree that those elements are there, I legit don't think they're needed. Not because I don't think painting isn't needed, but because people tend to over assume how much is required for painting. I'm going to draw a lot of references to 40K here merely because this actual topic is heavily being discussed over in the 40K community as well about tournaments having painting requirements and stuff like that. And I've seen what happens when tournaments lax on that requirement and the difficult that you have trying to get it back to it. But one of the things you have to understand is when a packet or when something says you need to be painted, it's not saying you need to be crystal brush painted. It's not even saying you need to be tabletop painted. Like legit, all it's looking for is an attempt of color was made. And in many situations with Khador being red, Signar being blue, Convergence being silver, there's lots of armies out there that you can get your first color just off of a color primer. So you'll hear a lot of times people use the terminology 3-color minimum. If you were to take a model, spray it blue, throw some flesh colors on the fleshy bits, and throw some metal colors on the metal bits, that's painted. That is a painting that meets painting requirements. A lot of people over assume painting requirements in a tournament means, I've got to have the eyes done properly and shading and highlights, and no, you just don't want to see silver on the damn table.
Now, maybe you can check this, Kevin, because I don't have access, and I know you're sitting at a computer. Can you check and see? Because I think Privateer Press's painting requirements are a little bit different than GW's, where GW I know is a 3-color minimum. I thought that Privateer Press had that different items had to be different colors, like.
They're distinguished to, I think they at one point in time did use the 3-color minimum reference, but I think it drew too many parallels to GW as a company, so they went the route of when there is a separation of model detail, there should be a separation of color, i.e. when somebody's pants meet their shirt, the shirt and the pants should be a different color. When a weapon meets the hand and the weapon should be a different color is their kind of situation. But though that is a Privateer Press requirement, I believe if you went the route of, like I said, having, blue for, get a Signar model, you primer it blue, you get some silver down, you get some fleshy on the fleshy bits down, I don't know many tournament organizers who are going to hold that against you and would consider that to be a painting requirement. Now, maybe you don't make one of the Privateer Press streams, but I think we need to distinguish the difference between trying to get to a paint level that you're on a Privateer Press stream because you're in Masters, or you're actually doing one of Privateer Press's, live coverage, casual live coverages or something to that effect, to just requiring painting so that when you go to a tournament, every player has some level of color to the model so that we aren't playing with models that don't have color to them. One of the biggest hurdles and one of the biggest proponents of having a color requirement is if you're in your local community, you're playing at your shop, you're playing in the basement, you're playing with a friend, do whatever you want. No one's going to tell you how to play your game. If you're playing in a tournament at a local store, you do whatever the EO wants. Like, I know that kind of sounds a little bit, like the EO is trying to rub an ego out or something like that, but in the end, it's their, the EO will determine what the route is. Maybe the EO is going to tell you, hey, I need, 3 color minimum. Maybe the EO is going to tell you that you follow the GW standard, whatever the case might be. But in most situations, a store or a local community who's just running an 8-man or 16-man tournament or something to that effect is just going to look for attendees, and they're not going to have their level of entry that high. So you probably could even get away with unpainted models at that standpoint. When you get to the event level, when you're going to some place that is a full day event, an actual con or tournament, a multi-day con, 2-day tournaments, two-day team tournaments, the ATC championships or something like that. It is I'm about to make a controversial statement that's going to piss off a lot of people. If you show up to that event and you don't have any level of color on your model, you're being an ass to your opponent because they have spent time and money and are away from their family and friends and job and whatever, and you couldn't even bother to put paint on your model?
And that's why I agree with Privateer Press's stand on moving to these more painted, required events. My thing is that I definitely believe, and it's no secret that I am more attuned with the hobby side of the game. Also, just prefacing, I apologize if my son yells. It might happen. He is down here. It may not be an issue, but if it is, I am prefacing it early. But
however,
no.
if you yell, it's fine.
But I definitely, personally, this is me, believe that it should start kind of bleeding over into the local events because of the fact that I understand that a lot of TOs are trying to get attendance. But if you start painting a little bit and you start getting to that minimum like you were talking about, Kevin, and then you push past that into another, into the next color, maybe you do you get the basic down and then you move past that and work on a little bit more than that and so on and so forth. I just really believe that all in all, people, there's a reason that people say that painted models play better, and it's not because they actually play better. It's because that you're more proud of them and that they generally see more table time, from what I understand.
Well, so here's a situation where I'm going to turn around and make a controversial statement like, if you play unpainted at a convention, you're an asshole. I'm also going to turn around and say, if you require painting when you're trying to build a community locally, or you're just running some small local event or something like that, don't push that pressure on the community. In order to make sure that we are an inclusive community, you need to provide a place, a non-painted safe place, if you will, for people who don't want to bother painting their models to be able to play this game beyond just their basis with their friends or the local game shop or something like that. There has to be a place where an individual who doesn't want to paint their armies can go to enjoy a tournament or a series of tournaments or whatever the case might be. But I feel like the level at which you're starting to talk about events and cons, sorry folks, painting requirements should be a barrier of entry to con. If you don't want to bother painting your models, don't come to the con. Don't ruin the experience for other individuals.
Or at least don't play in the major tournaments of the con. I could see free play, because maybe they want to do that. But no,
Iron Arena, do what you want. Like, Iron Arena has always been the super laid-back place. If you don't want to have painting requirements on Iron Arena, fine. If you don't want to have painting requirements at your local shop, fine. But it's just, you're really just being an ass if you go to a convention and you don't have painted shit. Now, some people may be like, well, what about con exclusives? Like, con exclusives, you can't have those painted, at which point I'll point out several high-level players who get their crap painted before they even play with it, even though it's a con exclusive. But, maybe there's an exception to con exclusive or con recently released models don't get painted or something like that. But I don't know. Like, at some point you have to draw the line on it. At some point you have to put your foot down.
With that. I think that's another line that we shouldn't draw, is that, if you're so excited about playing that con exclusive, do what these painters do. I went to Lock and Load this year. There was a guy there who was excited about playing Grimkin. So him, Tyson Koch, I know I'm mispronouncing it, and I apologize for that, Tyson.
I was going to say, he'll ping you on Facebook and be like, hey, asshole, it's pronounced.
Yeah. Long story short is that I saw them sit there, and for basically the first entire day, they clipped, they snipped, they glued together to all the lists that he needed, and basically he went forward with that. And I'm pretty sure that Tyson painted it with the airbrush to the general requirement, and they looked actually pretty good. All right after coming out. I believe if you want to play a convention exclusive at that convention, then you need to be on your A game and you need to get that shit painted as soon as you get there. Like, I don't think that's an exception.
It's a matter of timing. In a lot of situations, you're going to have people who are going to be picking up those models. And yes, you're right. You have individuals who have a pack of friends who want to turn around and help their friend turn around. What about the person who's going by themselves? The person who shows up to con by themselves, you basically saying, hey, because you didn't bring a pack of friends with you, you're just fucked. So it's just, I said I was going to draw a lot of parallels to this. So currently in the in the 40K community, they had for the longest time a painting requirement. And then they started taking note of the Warmachine community not having a painting requirement. So a lot of the major conventions took away that painting requirement. For the longest time, having something painted and playing at a convention level in 40K community was just an accepted norm. It just you had to do it. Period. End of story. There was no fourth giving to it. Every major convention requirement, every place requirement, GW required it. So everywhere you went to, it was just a requirement. It was an accepted fact. And then the conventions, the independent conventions, started rolling back that rule and allowing people to bring in stuff that wasn't painted, stuff that wasn't the actual, as proxy models or counts as models. And then you got to a point where one of the recent, past year, I remember going to Nova Open and wandering through the 40K place, and somebody had a Tau army. If you're not familiar with 40K, it's kind of like an anime-esque, robot-esque style army. But basically, they had a Tau army that he was basically subbing in Robotech toy models as his models because they were already colored. He didn't have to require painting, and he had the models laying around, so he'd have to buy the models. Now, that's an extreme scenario, but that's what happens when you relinquish on the rules.
Now, I don't think he was in a tournament, because I know Nova's stuck pretty heavy to their painting requirement. He probably was playing just generally, because I know for their grand tournament or Grand Prix, you have to be painted. But here's a parallel that you're talking about, and you brought it up, and I was going to say this. So you brought up the thing about proxies, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go to any Warmachine tournament, doesn't matter where you're at, unless it's like your super friendly one, Makio is trying to be super nice. You go to any event, okay, most steamrollers, and you're not going to have a tournament where they allow you to play whatever you want. Like it has to usually fall either within the conversion. Maybe they don't have you have it built, but for the most part, you're not playing, as Tony would call it, a picture of a model, taped to a base. And
that's his favorite way of playing.
Exactly. So that seems to be 100% a norm, and that people are willing to stand by, but not the fact of actually putting in the time and effort to paint the miniatures that you have spent thousands of dollars on.
And I think that's a situation where the company has come down and said, you will do this. Like, we will not allow these. These are in our rules documents and stuff like that. But there's never been a painting requirement from the very beginning. And arguably, I know people are going to disagree with it, arguably in the beginning, Privateer Press had no painting requirements because it was a way of pulling in new people. In the very beginning, they were like, look, all the other games require painting. We don't. Come join us. And that probably got them a swell of people into the community. But it's gotten to the point now where the community is big enough to stand on its own. It doesn't need, well, some might argue it does need recruitment, but it's big enough and it's robust enough, and Privateer Press is a developed community enough that I think you have to start putting in the brakes and being like, okay, we won't require you to do, play painted when you're at your local stuff, but when you come up to these cons, you got it. And arguably, I don't think Privateer Press will ever put that down. They're not going to put their neck out there to say, we're going to require this, because they're going to get backlash from the community. So they're almost like pushing for, hey guys, let's get it painted, let's get it done, but we're just going to leave it up to the tournament organizers or the event organizers to put that staple down. So I don't know. It's, as a community, we're going to have to make this decision of, do we require painted at convention level? And by community, I mean talk to your community, your local event organizers. If you're friends with people from Adepticon or TempleCon or CaptainCon, Enter the Crucible, any of those major tournaments, talk to them and be like, I think we should require painted, and get the conversation started, because as a community, it's the only way it's going to happen. But if you don't paint your models, if you go to a convention and you haven't bothered to paint your models, damn it, dude, you're doing a disservice to your opponent, and that's not cool.
Yeah, so for me, for an earlier statement that you made, you said that you believe that stores should allow people a safe space to play unpainted models, correct?
Basically, yeah.
And I say that should be reserved for your down-home fun games. You want to hang at the store and meet up with your buddy and test out any list games. But when you go to a tournament, and I don't care what level it is, unless they're basically having like a super-duper fun tournament, if you're going to a tournament which is in its own respect a competitive format, then you should be competitive in the fact that you meet all requirements, and that includes painting. I think that it's just as important. People expect people to know their rules. I don't think that it's too much to ask to also expect people to take a minute and delve into the Kevin Bashford method of painting and just get some different colors on there. I don't think that that's, and of course, one of my co-TOs, somebody I run, so many events throughout the year. Him and I have had this conversation because even though he runs a lot of events, he is super anti, painting requirement. And I have mentioned that I've wanted to do a painting requirement for Store Awards, with it being an event. And maybe within the next, 2 years, maybe that's something that I drive for, and it, I might lose some participation. But personally, I think that having an event that looks just as beautiful as it is played is something worth the risk for, and it's definitely something near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, and maybe Privateer Press sort of kind of has enabled it with the fact that if Master has a painting requirement and Champions had a painting requirement, but Steamroller doesn't, then your local tournaments can decide if they want to be painting requirement or not painting requirements just by choosing, I want Steamroller versus I want Masters. Now, Masters obviously comes with the added situation of your you get side, well, you get Vanguard, but you also get the DNC, because DNC doesn't exist in Steamrollers, but it sure as hell exists in Masters. So maybe some tournament organizers don't necessarily want that. I don't know. I don't think at the local level you should be able to provide local players a tournament experience and not require painting. But when I go to con level and people are spending their hard-earned money and time away from family and everything like that, it should be required. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't.
And see, I guess I am more of a purist when it comes to that, because I believe it should be across the board except for when you're playing. I mean, and this is a question not...
You're an ultra hobbyist, though.
Somewhat, yeah. But I mean, I used to be a big tournament player. Like, that was my big thing. That's what got me into the game.
Being a hobbyist doesn't mean you can't be a tournament player. Being a tournament player doesn't mean you can't be a hobbyist. You're an ultra hobbyist. Like, your draw is as much the competitive end as it is seeing beautiful models, and a perfect world for you would be a competitive end and seeing beautiful models.
Yeah, and I got into Warmachine and Hordes because of the fact that it was, such a stronger competitive game. Like the rule set at the time when I hopped in was one of the strongest rule sets, and all of my friends talked like wonders about it, and I abandoned 40K and fantasy in order to play it. And, and since then I've become, an ultra hobbyist. But it's just proven to me even more so that I believe that, having, there's so many game systems where they really believe it. Like, the old competitive, like if you play Wrath of Kings, they almost require you to be painted, like it's part of your actual, like, tournament score. Now, I don't believe that should happen. I don't believe that part of your tournament score should be painted, which was something that GW used to do years ago, which was really dumb.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, you should have a requirement for painted, but your painting should not determine your success in the tournament.
I agree with
that.
100%.
Just as much as I don't like sportsman scores. I don't feel like if somebody doesn't like the way you talk or like the way you play the game should be an impact on your tournament scores. Now, if you're a problem, that needs to be addressed to the EO, but that's completely different from some arbitrary were you nice enough or not score to determine if you make it to the final tables or not. Like, your competitive score should be based off of win-loss, and we'll save the strength of schedule argument for another day. But it should be based off your win-loss, not were you a nice guy, or do you have tabletop plus?
Which I agree with, 100%. And that was always something that was dumb. I had a friend who played Imperial Guard a long, long time ago, and I remember him being able to, he got into had a great day, and then it came down that basically he ended up losing an Art Boy spot overall because of the fact that he wasn't able to, because that wasn't his part. Like, he had the painting down, but he actually ended up losing a good bit of the day because of the fact that, he wasn't super big into the hobby aspect. And I think that's a little bit too much.
And I almost wonder if there isn't the stigmata or the people who don't want painting requirements, if there isn't some latent fear that world is around the corner if you require, like, what's next? First you're going to require painting requirements, then there's going to be painting scores and all this other stuff. I can respect that concern, but I don't think you should let fears determine the enjoyment of people when they're traveling. My argument really just wraps around people are traveling to cons and don't want to play against gray plastic when they do so.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things, like, I definitely believe that we have, this is a hobby-based game, people can play, if you want to play this game competitively in the fact, and you want to play it without using the models because you can't paint, there are systems such as Vassal and other such programs, or play Tactics, where they paint it for you.
I would not put Warmachine Tactics and Warmachine the actual tabletop on the same level, both from a mechanics and actual balance perspective on that. So yeah. I'm not gonna follow you there on that one.
Well, no, I'm saying in the aspect of if they don't want to paint their models, then that's what they get.
Well, we can't ostracize, we can't go to the other end of the spectrum. See, the problem is that you get two spectrums and the needle constantly fluxing back and forth between both of them. You can't have a scenario where in one hand you're saying everything must be painted or get the hell out of my game, and on the other hand you can't go, nothing needs to be painted, get the hell out of my game with your painting requirements. There has to be a boundary in which both spectrums can exist. And like I said, the local level, have your not painted. You're not traveling, you're not spending money. The worst travel, quote unquote, you're doing is maybe an hour or two to get to where you're going. But if it's local and it's not a con or something like that, you're accepting the fact that there may be unpainted models there because someone doesn't want to paint their models. But then on the flip side of that spectrum, you have to allow for the people who are spending time and money and all that stuff to have the fullest enjoyment of their experience possible, and that requires you have painted crap. So you get both ends of the spectrum get to exist in this world. You're not isolating one person and saying, you can't play the game. Now, we may say, you can't play the con, but if it's up front, if it's set out in front, and look, you cannot go to conventions with unpainted crap, then it's not a situation of you went traveling to Lock and Load and was like, oops, I didn't know. If all cons do it, then it's just becomes known rule. Go to a con, you have to have painted. And I know there's an argument there of, well, what if a con is my local event? Like I live down the street from Seattle, so Lock and Load is my con. Sorry, Hoss, paint your crap.
And I believe that, and I believe in general, like if that stands, which I understand people drive a long way, but I believe that if there's big events in general, then that's where I believe that you should have an equal mix. Like, you could do 6 events a year that are painted, 6 events a year. If you're doing 12 events in a year, an event each month, which, some stores may not be doing, regardless, you could do half painted, half not. And that goes for the local.
But you're isolating. Like
you're not really.
If it's a con, then the individual has to have the capacity of understanding, I am traveling, this is a requirement. If it's local, then you're basically saying, hey, dude that lives 2 minutes down the street, and this is your local game store where all your friends play, if you don't paint, you can't play. You're basically kind of throwing a fence out and being like, you can't play in my house because you're not painted. And I recognize the irony behind saying that, basically that's what I'm saying to do at the convention level. But we're talking about I drove 5 minutes or I had to fly on a plane for 4 hours.
So then playing devil's advocate, then why even require models?
Well, I mean, if you
Isn't that a barrier? Isn't that a barrier of entry? Now people have to spend.
It's so please remember, this whole community is driven by a company that wants to make money. So good luck putting in a rule that says you don't have to spend money to participate in a convention. Privateer Press wants their money. They do it through conventions and supporting conventions, and they require their convention people to have the models there. That's why the packet requires it.
So, but we should be able to pile all of the pieces of the model onto the base, right? We don't have to glue them together or clip them.
If it's a local game store, if it's between you and your friends in your basement, or it's a local game store and the person you're playing at your local game store is okay with that, do whatever you want.
No, but I'm talking about from the steamroller aspect at a local store. I'm saying that it seems to be that we're okay.
Does the steamroller packet require the steamroller packet require the model to be assembled in at least 50% of the model? Yes, those are rules created by PP, and you have to follow them.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in general, I don't remember if it's painted or not, but I'm saying that more people should get away from just running a steamroller and maybe focus on doing a Champions or Masters. And that's one thing I think PP did kind of mess up a little bit, because they created this event that basically all painting stuff, everything that has to do with painting, surrounds itself around ADR.
Do you know why they put painting in the Champions and in the Masters packet?
You told me. So that you can't... Go ahead.
It's the only formats they put on their stream. So if it's in the packet, they don't have to worry about making sure you paint it in order to get you on their stream.
Yep.
They don't put SR on a stream. They don't put Iron Gauntlet on a stream. Well, they might grab random person A to play against a staff player, but guess what they're going to do before they even come and approach you? They're going to see if your army's painted.
Yeah, and as I said, me and and Tionis have talked about this. My seething ginger have talked about this a lot because it is well.
Ionis?
Huh? Tionis, seething ginger. I'm just gonna go with that. It's easier. We've talked about it many times, and he is very much on the anti-painting requirement trend. And I really believe that if it wasn't required at our convention, which it is, for some events, that he would be, he would be completely fine with that. And it always questions me because, I always look at it from the aspect of wanting my events to look the absolute best they can, to be picture worthy.
I'm not even thinking about it from the EO perspective. I'm thinking about it from the customer's perspective. If you have a customer who's paying you money to get the utmost in hobby experience, not having models painted, you're not giving it to them.
And that's as I said, that's where it comes from for me, because it's like, if I want, there's so many different things you can. You're playing a tabletop game because of like part of it is very much the aesthetic. You have these beautiful models, you have these hard driven, scenarios, and these, the general idea of you playing on this war torn battlefield or whatever, and then you look across and you see an all ghost gray army.
Yeah, I don't know. I like, the more I think about it, the more as soon as this goes up, I know Seething Ginger's going to be pinging me on DM. Well, what the fuck, dude? But
he's not even going to ding you. He's literally going to message me and be like, I've made it clear where I stand on this. Like, I know, I said it.
That's fine. I think it is a disservice to your opponent at a convention level. At the tournament level and the local level, do whatever you want. But it's the community is going to have to drive that change. They really are.
Now, do you think? Let me ask you this hypothetical. Now, to go on what you just said about the local again, do you think that if they started to change it on a local level, and I'm talking the steamrollers, that then you would see more of a drastic change in the conventions, where you have more of a.
There's not a feed.
There's not a what?
There's not that. That's not a ground swelling movement. You're going to get a situation where if they require it at the local level, there are more local metas than there are convention metas. You're not going to get a groundswell from having painting requirement at a local level unless it was just carpeted across the board. Every local level was doing it, because you'll get these pocket communities that don't requirement, and that's merely going to feed up into the event. And then you're going to be that one person who's like, cool, half my opponents were painted, half my opponents weren't painted, because the ones that weren't painted came from a local community that didn't requirement. This is a trickle down movement. You have to get it from the top to come down. And then you're going to get situations where at the convention you get nothing but painted armies that you play against, and then when you go to the local level you don't, and then it becomes a situation almost where it probably won't happen, but you may get situations where if you get enough traveling convention people in your meta, that the local meta will respond to, well, shit, I am like one of two people who don't have my stuff painted, maybe I should. And then you're just going to have people like, fuck it, I don't care what your rules are. I'll just play at the local level and not play painted, or not paint my stuff, because I just hate doing it. There are people out there who legitimately hate painting the models and would be more than happy if these models came out pre-printed or pre-painted.
Which is why I always believe that, commission painting will always have, will always have a home to exist in.
The price point's way too high. Legitimately, like, commission painters are amazing painters and they put out amazing stuff, but I yet to ever come across a commission painter who's willing to do a low price point. I primered your stuff, I put flesh on the fleshy bits, I put metal on the metal bits, because they're not going to waste their time.
Oh, so obviously you haven't seen Blue Table Painting, because that is basically...
They still still do way and above primer in 2 colors.
Okay, I wash.
So it's that is the only reason why commission painting is not the solution to the problem, because anybody who hates painting, you're going to have individuals who don't want to paint and have spent the thousands of dollars on the model and don't have another thousands of dollars in order. I'm one of those individuals. I spent a ton of money on models, and there's many times where I've been like, God, I wish we could just take this army and hand it off to somebody to get it painted. My Menoth is a prime example. I really, really, really want my Menoth to be in the traditional colors. I can't do it. I cannot do it well. I've tried over and over again. Can't do it. but I'm not going to give it to a commission army because if I would, I'd have to come up with $4,000 to get my entire army painted. And I'm not going to do that. Like, I have a kid who wants to go to college, and that's textbook money. So commission painting is not the answer for the local Joe unless someone wants to create a commission painting service that's primer and 2 colors. Like, they literally call it primer and 2 colors studios. And like, hey, do you want this stuff painted? Give me $50 and I'll primer and 2 color your army.
Yeah, and then once again you come into timeline. But yeah, I agree with you in that aspect. It's just one of those things that I would like to see more painted armies than not. And I know that we actually had a big moment, I think it was during Champions, at Nova this year, where a good friend of mine, thankfully he came to me either the night before or 2 nights before. He brought me his army and said, hey, is this good for Champions? And I straight up told him no, because it wasn't to where it needed to be. And, he kind of hated me on the day, Saturday when we did Champions because he had spent most of his night painting that unit up.
So the only... I don't think there is a single player out there who wouldn't mind playing with a painted army or would enjoy playing with a painted army. Even the people who hate painting models wouldn't mind if they woke up one morning and their army was painted for. The magical fairies came over to their room and in the middle of the night painted their entire army for them. I don't know of anybody who'd be like, God, I hate this. I have a painted army and all I want to do is play with gray plastic. It is not a matter of I don't want it painted. It's a matter of I don't have time, I don't have money, I don't have the desire, and you're going to have a portion of this community that those individuals can fit in. So that's why I'm not saying I don't feel like there should be a painting requirement carte blanche. If you show up at your local game store and it's not painted, everybody should hit you with bricks. But the cons is another discussion.
It almost makes me wonder if, I understand that you're cornering a good bit of the market, but I always wonder, how interesting it would be to have a game system that requires you to be painted no matter what, And, for all
it has to start that way.
Yep.
The only reason that we are having this conversation is because Privateer Press started without a painting requirement. If Privateer Press had started with a painting requirement and we did not know of a world other than everything has to be painted, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So
I agree.
But we're going to talk this one into round circles. I know that our co-hosts probably completely disagree with this and would have provided great debate on this, but unfortunately couldn't attend. So I'm going to toss it out to the cast, or actually to the listeners. What do you think? Should there be painting requirement all the way down to the local level? Should it be at the con level? Should there not even be painting requirement? Because fuck it, I don't want to.
Not only that, but what's your community look like? Are you a painted person? Or are you a non-painted person? And what is your reasoning for? I would like to see some people maybe why they did it, or maybe it's effort. And if people are scared about the painting, like maybe it worries them, then maybe they need to work more on taking classes or, trying to learn a little bit more, because I don't believe that not being painted should be because of fear,
Primer can, fleshy on the fleshy bits, metal on the metal bits. Done. Also, this is the 4th week of October. There's actually going to be a 5th cast for October. So please help us out. We're going to be doing an FAQ style cast next episode. So please throw us your questions, and we're going to get all 4 of us on here, and we'll round robin through the questions.
And you can put that on either in the comments below, or you can go over to our Facebook page, where we will have a post that is open for questions, which I will create here in a bit, and we will have anybody able and willing and having a question that is, fun or, willing, interesting, we will definitely answer it.
So I think that's a rant-isode.
That's a rant-isode if I ever heard one.
So this is what happens Polar Bear when you don't show up for a cast. You let the two painters get on the cast, and you just get a rant-a-sode about painting. It's all Polar Bear's fault.
So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to let this cast sit for the next 2 hours with random beeps and boops.
Random beeps and noises, so he can't look at the wave sounds to determine where to cut the cast at.
Yep, you got it. He's got to listen to the whole thing.
Awesome.
And with that, everybody, I want to thank you again for turning into another turn extension.
Jesus, really? Have a good night, everybody.